Good afternoon. I'm Aníbal Santeliz, and this is the Hour of Truth. And today, I want to present to you the topic on Moloch, the one I've been promising to you. So let me start up, and forgive me any of my mistakes over here. I'm gonna lean forward and try to be as sharp as possible. So let's go ahead and start. Moloch is a god in the Old Testament, one of those idols that was worshipped. Their sons and their daughters, they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan. That's what we find that the children of Israel did in the old days. Moloch, let's start up. Sacrificing to the demons. You know that God categorically commanded the following: "And thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Moloch, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord." This is in Leviticus 18:21. Warning not to do any children's sacrifice. There were practices of children's sacrifice children sacrifices by the Canaanites in the old days. This is all this area where we find Palestine and Israel today. And sacrificing children to Moloch was one of the practices that they were doing before even the children of Israel got there. So for at least 400 years they were performing these practices and doing really horrific stuff. Let me read in Leviticus 20 verses 1 and 2. "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Again, thou shalt say to the children of Israel, Whosoever he be of the children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that giveth any of his seed unto Moloch, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones." It is important to realize that sometimes, maybe here the image will be better, but I'm not sure. Let me go back to where we were. And some people believe that Yahweh was a god of the Canaanites and he allowed all of these practices. But let me tell you that Yahweh, or Jehovah, the God of the Old Testament in the Bible, did not allow these practices, and he did not avail them. He did not recommend these practices. In fact, he threatened to punish those practices, and he took away all the children of Canaan because of these practices. Let me read again. "And the Lord spake unto Moses, Again, thou shalt say to the children of Israel, Whosoever he be of the children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that giveth any of his seed unto Moloch, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones." So he was not permitting these practices. He was against these practices. These Yahweh or Jehovah, as some people believe, he was okay with these practices. Let's continue on. Who are these gods? Moloch, and these gods are mentioned here. It says, "For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Then did Solomon build an high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Moloch, the abomination of the children of Ammon, because that they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtaroth." This is further in the verse 33. Because it says, because that they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in mine eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgments, as did David his father. So who are these gods? It's the gods of the Ammonites, the Sidonians, and the Edomites, right? So the Sidonians, Moabites, and Ammonites. Let's continue on. Moloch, Melech, Milcom, Baal. Let me read unto you this. Okay, give me just a second. I'm gonna just make sure we have also this in place, so you can see it very well when I am working on it. So let's go now. It says Moloch, Melech, Milcom, and Baal. Let me place it for you as much as I can. I hope you can read it there. These are just generic titles to deities in Canaan. There were high places for the worship of Chemosh, Moloch or Milcom, and Ashtaroth or Ashtoreth, and even chariots dedicated to the sun. Please read with me 1 Kings chapter 23 verse 11 and 13. I have a little mistake there. I'm not sure if it's 1st or 2nd Kings, but let me find it for you real quick. 1 Kings chapter 23, I guess it's 2nd Kings, but verse 11. Yes, it's 2nd Kings. So in 2nd Kings chapter 11, chapter 23, verses 11 to 13, it says, there were, and he took away the horses that the kings of Judah had given to the sun. So there were horses and chariots to the sun, dedicated to the sun, at the entering in the house of the Lord, by the chamber of Nathan-Melech, the chamberlain, which was in the suburbs, and burned the chariots of the sun with fire. There were chariots for the sun and horses for the sun, for the adoration, the worshipping of the sun. And the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of a mount of corruption, which Solomon the king of Israel had built for Ashtaroth, the abomination of the Sidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the children of Ammon, did the king defile. Let's continue on because it gets more interesting. This is about Moloch, but let me tell you about the apostasy in Judah. What happened? How did they pass from worshiping? How did they come from worshiping the real God to worship a totally false God who was requiring these abominable practices of children's sacrifice? How did they get to that point? Let's continue on. They say they worship the sun, the moon, and the stars. They build high places. It says in 2 Kings chapter 23 verses 11 and 13, we already read it, that they build these high places. Let me go to the next one. They made cakes to the Queen of Heaven. Seest thou not what they do in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. So these people were offering cakes. It was a practice in the Old Testament to offer cakes to the Queen of Heaven. So the Ashtaroth was also called the Queen of Heaven. We still have someone who is called the Queen of Heaven today, don't we? But this is in Jeremiah chapter 17, chapter 7, verses 17 to 18. Let's continue on. Children's sacrifice. They have built also the high places of Baal, to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings and to Baal. So they were sacrificing children to Baal. Wait a second, we were talking about Moloch. Yes, it happens to be one and the same, but let's keep on and you will see. You have, let me start from the beginning. They had built also the high places of Baal to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings unto Baal, which I commanded not, nor spake it, neither came it into my mind. Therefore, behold, the days come, said the Lord, that this place shall no more be called Tophet, nor the valley of the sons of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. You know that this valley was a beautiful valley in that place called the valley of the sons of Hinnom. In Greek, the word will be the land of Hinnom, and it has one word, which is Gehenna. The word for the land of Hinnom, this one, it is in Hebrew, in Greek, called Gehenna. What does Gehenna means? The land of Hinnom. What was the land of Hinnom? It was a beautiful land. And they were doing children sacrifices in that place. And it was called Tophet. You know what Tophet means? It means drums. Apparently, and you're going to see it later on, further on, they play the drums so they could not hear the sounds of a cry of a children who were being burnt alive. This is horrific. But in the times of Jesus, Jesus talked about the land of Hinnom. He talked about Gehenna. And you know what he mentioned Gehenna for? For the word that in Latin is inferno, and that we today call as hell, because the Nordic gods and the goddess of the death was Hela. So in English we call it hell. In Spanish we call it infierno, because it comes from the Latin inferno. But it's the same place. So what was this place? Well, it was a beautiful place, a former beautiful place. After the Babylonians came and defiled the whole nation, it became a place, as it says, a valley of a slaughter. And all the, it was like a dumpster. It was like a place where they would dump all the trash and burn it. And that's what Jesus referred to when he mentioned the word Gehenna, that we translated in our Bibles as infierno or hell. Let's continue on. Children sacrifice. This is Jeremiah 7:31. Please read with me. And they have built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of the sons of Hinnom, so the valley of the drums, to burn their sons and their daughters in their fire, which I commanded them not, neither came it into my heart. It was never in the heart of Jehovah. It was never in the heart of Yahweh. Yahweh is not the God of the Canaanites. He was the God of Israel. And we have to mention that, and we have to find that out in the Old Testament for ourselves, so we are not deceived by this belief that Jehovah or Yahweh was the God of the Canaanites. By no means, my friends. They worship the owl. Yes, let me show you here. You know that in Hebrew the word for owl is Lilith, and they worshipped in those days the God of wisdom, the God of riches. But let me take you there and you're gonna see it. And please read with me. Let me see. Yes, you'll be able to. They worship the owl, called Lilith in Hebrew. This mythological figure of a naked lady with all feet was extracted from Talmudic documents dating from the first centuries. It was believed that she came out at night, just as the owls do, to eat children. Owl in Hebrew, as I mentioned before, is Lilith. And it is mentioned in Isaiah chapter 34:14. When it talks about the owl, you look for the original Hebrew and it's Lilith. Let me take you to the other one. Moloch location. Where was Moloch worshipped? Moab and Ammon, because from these lands is where the Bible says that all these gods, Milcom and Moloch and Ashtoreth, came. Where was Moab and Ammon? Can you see the place there in yellow? So that is Israel, and Samaria is close there. On the top, on the pink area, that is Sidon and Tyre. That's where the god Baal and Ashtoreth came from. But we find on the yellow area at the right hand side, you'll see it down in kind of a bluish color. You will see Ammon, and if you continue down, you will see Moab, and if you continue down, you're gonna see Edom at the very south of that place. And on the other side of this lake, you're gonna see Jerusalem, and you're gonna see Judah. So if we continue, of course, to the left, you are going to see Ashkelon and Gaza, which were the places of the Philistines. But let's continue on. On the rooftops, they were worshiping on the rooftops. Let me adjust the image here, so you can see it perfectly there. And come over here, and you'll see it very well. Now you're able to see. Let me put it for you so you can read. It says, there were high places for the worship of Chemosh, Moloch, Milcom, and Ashtaroth, and even chariots dedicated to the sun. And that's what we read before in 2 Kings chapter 23, verses 11 to 13. But in Jeremiah 19:13, we read, in the house of Jerusalem and the houses of the kings of Judah shall be defiled as the place of Tophet, because of all the houses upon whose roofs they have burned incense unto all the host of heaven, the stars, the moon, and the sun, or the false trinity, Father, Mother, Son, as we have already talked in other presentations that you'll be able to see soon. I've got them in Spanish right now, but you'll be able to see them soon in English. I will present them to you. But let's continue on, and we will see the witchcraft with human bones that were practiced in the Old Testament in that area, as we find the witness of Jeremiah 8 verses 1 and 2. Let me read for you. It says, at that time, said the Lord, they shall bring out the bones of the kings of Judah, and the bones of his princes, and the bones of the priests, and the bone of the prophets, and the bones of the inhabitants of Jerusalem. 5 types of bones, by the way, and every time the number 5 appears in the Bible, it has to do with falling. There's somebody failing. There is a battle and somebody failed. As it says, Babylon has fallen. Well, this is the number 5 in an implicit manner. So all these bones, they were, at that time, said the Lord, they shall bring out the bones of the kings of Judah, the bones of his princes, and the bones of the priests, and the bones of the prophets, and the bones of the inhabitants of Jerusalem, out of their graves. What do they do that for? And they shall spread them before the sun and the moon and the host of heaven. They were worshiping the host of heaven, the Father, Mother, Son, Trinity that they worshipped, and after whom they have walked, and whom they have sought, and whom they have worshipped. They shall not be gathered, nor be buried. They shall be for dung upon the face of the earth. So this is what was going to happen to that land of the sons of Hinnom, or Gehenna. Instead of a beautiful garden, instead of a beautiful place, it was going to become a place where you put all the dung, all the bones, all the carcasses, dead animals, dead people, whatever, and they would just burn them until they were just ashes. And that's precisely the word that Jesus used to refer to the final destination of a wicked. It's just ashes. But let's continue on, because it's not the topic for today. Consulting a wood rod. My people ask counsel of their stocks, and their stock declareth unto them. For the spirit of whoredoms hath caused them to err, and they have gone a whoring from under their God. They sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains, and burn incense upon the hills, under oaks and poplars and elms, because the shadow thereof is good. You know that in Carthage, where Carthage was a place that was built by the people from Tyre and Sidon. And Carthage was a beautiful place there in the Caribbean, where they would do, commerce throughout the land. It was a center of worldwide commerce, the Mediterranean. So in that place in Carthage, where Hannibal comes from, he sacrificed children to the devil, to their gods, to Baal. Let's read in one of the witnesses, and this is Cleitarchus. Cleitarchus, paraphrase of a scholium to Plato's Republic, has a description of a practice which predates the fall of Carthage in 146, after the Punic Wars. There stands in their midst a bronze statue of Kronos, its hands extended over a bronze brazier, the flames of which engulf the child. When the flames fall upon the body, the limbs contract. Wow. And the open mouth seems almost to be laughing until the contracted body slips quietly into the brazier. Thus, it is that the grin is known as sardonic laughter, since they die laughing. That's what Paul Mosca says, quoting, of course, Cleitarchus and Scholium. It is more than I and you can bear. But this is a simple fact. This happened in the past and has happened throughout history. Let's continue on. I will show you some more. Diodorus Siculus. That's another witness that we have to call for, and he will show us. Let's see what Diodorus says. He says, there was in their city a bronze image of Cronus extending in its hands, palms up, and sloping toward the ground, so that each of the children, when placed thereon, rolled down and fell into a sort of gaping pit filled with fire. This is Diodorus Siculus. But there is more. Diodorus Siculus also relates that relatives were forbidden to weep, and that when Agathocles defeated Carthage, the Carthaginian nobles believed they had displeased the gods by substituting low-born children for their own children. They attempted to make amends by sacrificing 200 children of the best families at once, and in their enthusiasm actually sacrificed 300 children. Can you believe that? That happened in the past. And it makes me think of those places of burial places in the Andes that have been excavated. And when they excavated those places, they have found little children there with kind of some idols and some, petite idols and some treasures. And apparently they were the children of high, the people of high society, because they thought they had to please their gods by sacrificing their very high-born children. So this is what I'm talking about. is what I have found in those documents when they do this research and find these artifacts in those excavations in the Andes. And you know, this is pre-Columbian, and this is probably the same practice, right? They were doing, or at least similar practices of worshiping their idols. Another kind of idols, but same practice. Now let's continue on, and I will show you the history of Sicily. Let me take you here to the history of Sicily. It says, Freeman, in the history of Sicily from the earliest times, 1894, states that the Carthaginian nobles had acquired and raised children not for their own, but for the express purpose of sacrificing them to the god. The author states that during the siege, the 200 highborn children were sacrificed in addition to another 300 children who were initially saved from the fire by the sacrifice of these acquired substitutes. Plutarch wrote in De Superstitione, 171. Let me read what he said. But with full knowledge and understanding, they themselves offered up their own children, and those who had no children would buy little ones from poor people and cut their throats as if they were so many lambs or young birds. Meanwhile, the mother stood by without a tear or moan, but should she utter a single moan or let fall a single tear, she had to forfeit the money, and her child was sacrificed nevertheless. And the whole area before the statue was filled with a loud noise of flutes and drums, that the cries of wailing should not reach the ears of the people. See that we are talking about these drums that the valley of Tophet had, because the valley of Tophet there in the land of Hinnom was called the valley of Tophet because Tophet means drums. So we are connecting dots here, but let's bring you to archaeology, some artifacts, and you'll be static by this. In the early 20th century, scholarly opinion on the topic begins to be informed by the results of archaeological excavations in the Near East, notably those by R.A.S. McAllister at Gasser during 1902-1909. McAllister reported evidence of child sacrifice in late Bronze Age Canaan. Consensus shifted towards the assumption of widespread child sacrifice in Canaan, although there were dissenting opinions. And there's a lot of dissenting opinions, by the way. And we have to recognize that. The French excavations. French-led excavations at Carthage began in 1921, and from 1923 reported finds of a large quantity of urns containing a mixture of animals and children's bones. René Duzot identified a 4th century BC stela found in Carthage as depicting a child sacrifice. A temple at Amen, 1400 to 1250 before Christ, so 1400 years to 1250 years before Christ, excavated and reported upon by J.B. Hennessy in 1966, shows the possibility of bestial and human sacrifice by fire. Temple at Amen. A temple at Amen, excavated and reported upon by J.B. Hennessy in 1966, shows the possibility of bestial and human sacrifice by fire. While evidence of child sacrifice in Canaan was the object of academic disagreement, with some scholars arguing that merely children's cemeteries had been unearthed in Carthage, the mixture of children's with animal bones as well as associated epigraphic evidence involving mention of Moloch, that M-L-K is Moloch, led to a consensus that, at least in Carthage, child sacrifice was indeed common practice. The Star of Moloch. I will have to stop right here and I will have the part number 2 because some technicalities now. But we will continue in the part number 2 right after this. Please get the 2 videos. I mean, click on one and then click on the other so you can have a big picture, so you can have everything. For now, let's stop, and in a couple of minutes I will, well, in an hour I will upload everything. I'll see you shortly.